Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emily Spranger. I'm an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning. We are very happy to have one of our own NCU alumni coming to present, Dr. Elizabeth Contreras, with one of our School of Education faculty members, Dr. Lori Bedford. So a couple of things, just housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar and we will post it in our CTL webinars LibGuides page. If you would like to see the live transcript, if you'd like to see the subtitles, feel free to click on the CC option at the bottom of your Zoom and hit show subtitle if you'd like to see that. Chat is absolutely welcome. Do remember, if you want everyone to see your chat in the chat function, you do need to select the drop down for everyone. Otherwise, it's just going to go straight to the panelists and the host here. And then questions. Please pose any questions that you may have in the Q&A. And I'm very excited to learn a little bit more about graduate education and a transformative learning experience. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Contreras.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. NCU is such a great school. I loved being a student and I have loved everything I learned and putting it into practice. So I'm excited to be able to be here today, and let's go ahead and get started. So in this webinar, we're going to be talking about transformational learning theory and what it means. So we're going to be answering these questions as we go today. So first, we're going to look at what is the purpose of doctoral education and how is doctoral education a transformative process? Because when we listen to that word transformative, we probably have in our mind an idea of what it is. And today we're going to take that concept of transformation and talk about how it, kind of relates to graduate education and what everybody goes through in this process. And we're going to be focusing on Mezros Transformational Learning Theory, and we're going to look at how it supports student growth. And finally, we will look at what are the roles of the student and the faculty member in the process, because education is a partnership between the student and their professors. And when we embrace that partnership, we truly start to understand what transformational learning theory is, and we engage in that transformative process in a very real way and a very meaningful way. So I'm excited today to see what you guys think. And if you have any questions at this point, please go ahead and ask them now.
So while you're getting your questions together, feel free to just type them in the chat or raise your hand. Emily is great at facilitating that. So please jump in whenever you feel like you have something you want to contribute. And moving forward, I do want to just set some context here. So Elizabeth, or Dr. Contreras, graduated just recently from the School of Education, and I had the honor of being her chair. She is a star student, and not only that, but she had the personality and the characteristics of someone who's going to do great things practicing at the doctoral level. And so we've been doing a number of things since her graduation together, and I've really appreciated that. So just want to shout out to Elizabeth and all of her great work. As we start our conversation today, I do want to kind of set the stage for this discussion around doctoral education. And the title of the webinar is Graduate Education. And while I think that these the things that we're going to talk about today in the transformational process happens also in throughout a master's degree or even in a bachelor's degree, my interest, my philosophies really are grounded in a doctoral degree because of the nature of the beast, if you will. So a couple things about that. So first of all, we need to look at those macrostructures that define the process of doctoral education. And one of the things that strikes me, and if this is new vocabulary to you, you might find it funny too. At NCU, we develop, students develop simple traditional dissertations. And so that it is simple does not mean that it's not complex or something difficult. That's just what it's called in the literature. So the simple traditional dissertation is your 5-chapter dissertation that starts, that has an introduction to literature review, methods, findings, and then some conclusions. In other programs, in other schools, dissertations are done in a variety of ways, particularly in the STEM fields. Some dissertations are a series of publishable or published manuscripts. So that's one thing. As students come into the program, as faculty, we need to help them understand, and as students, we need to understand what are those macrostructures of the process. What does that involve? What are those deliverables? What are those expectations for us? And a little bit about how that's different. And one of the reasons for that is, so I have students, and I'm a chair for a number of students who may be going through the process and they use dissertations from other schools as examples. Very robust dissertations, very great studies, interesting findings, but not always within the same spirit as we develop them here at NCU. So it's really important that students understand those macrostructures as defined by this particular institution. The other piece of the doctoral education, I think, that becomes very important for students as they enter that dissertation sequence, and even before that, is to understand what knowledge and skills they need in order to succeed. And I'm going to back up and say, that really is part of the beginning process, and this is something we do need to think about in the content courses. So I'm going to correct myself there. Doctoral education, knowledge and skills is different from what we've used in master's and bachelor's degrees. We build upon those skills, but there are new skills. We're going to talk about a few of them in terms of critical thinking, particularly in a few slides later. But just to kind of, again, set the stage for the kinds of things we need to be thinking about here. Number one, those definitions of the deliverables and the expectations at NCU, and then what skills and knowledge students need to accomplish that.
Okay, so I really like that Dr. Bedford talked about the fact that when we come into the doctoral program, we come to it with our master's level, right? So everybody that comes in to get their doctorate has an advanced degree already and a lot of education under our belt already, right? So I know for me, when I came in as a doctor into the doctoral program, I had a master's degree in history. I had been teaching for over 15 years, and I thought, I knew what I was doing. And I found out very quickly that while I was a master in certain fields, the doctoral experience is very, very different from any other degree or program that a student is going to have. And especially at a school like NCU, which is 100% online, it is a totally different experience from what you would have in a traditional program in a brick and mortar school. And so if we look at the doctoral education as a transformative process, we can be very open to both the challenges and the growth process. And what the transformative process does is it helps students, along with the guidance of the faculty member, to acknowledge the change that is both cognitive and behavioral. Like Dr. Bedford said, there are different stages of critical thinking that come into play when doing your doctoral studies that are not there as much when you're doing your bachelor's and your master's degree. And the student might not quite understand that when they're coming in. So it is up to the professors and the community at large to help guide the student through those changes and to understand that this process is going to be different. And we have to kind of understand the academic genre of doctoral education. It is different. It is not the same as writing. Writing a dissertation is not writing a master's thesis, especially at NCU, especially in the School of Education. it is very much a study-based process. And at least for me, it was the first time I had ever done anything like this. And it was a humongous learning curve. And at first, I felt a little bit overwhelmed by that learning curve. But when I embraced the idea that I was here to grow and learn, and that every single assignment I did in the beginning courses, all the way through the dissertation, was helping to guide me to develop those critical thinking skills that I would need to write my dissertation, I was able to really embrace the process, and I was able to grow a lot faster. So what the whole process of transformative learning does is it makes you aware of what's happening to you, and it makes you embrace what's going on and how you're evolving and how you're transforming, because education is transformative. There's no way you stay the same in any course from the beginning to the end. But when we learn to embrace that, we can grow a lot. And it is up, in my opinion, and through the research, to these three main things: community support, meaningful research, and reflection. And when students feel supported, then they are able to make connections with other students and with other people in the academic community. And they're able to engage in meaningful research, and they're able to reflect. And as an NCU alumnus, what I would highly recommend is that if you're watching this webinar and you're at the beginning of your program, every single one of the assignments that you're doing in every single class is going to get you ready to write your dissertation. So take the time to really hone in on the processes that you're going through, and make even those 7-page papers you're writing every week meaningful, and make them actionable, and then reflect on them. When you get feedback from your professor, reflect on it. What is it that they're saying you did well? And what is it that they're saying you need to improve on? And take those notes and use them for your own reflection and benefit moving forward to the next one. And if you can do that, you will start to see not only the road ahead of you, but also where you've been, and you'll become more aware of your own evolution and transformation. So are there any questions at this point? I know we've kind of thrown a lot out at you. So before we move on, any questions from anybody?
I'm just gonna ask a question right now, just because I'm curious. When you started your doctoral journey, did you know what you wanted to do your research in before you began?
Well, that's kind of funny because, yeah, kind of. I knew that I was really interested in mindfulness, and my dissertation was about test anxiety and how mindfulness helps to kind of alleviate that. But when I came to the dissertation process, I had this unbelievably elaborate multi-step study in my mind, and I was just so sure it was going to be fantastic. And Dr. Bedford said, yes, that's a great idea, but you need to really scale it back. And that's what I learned. And what I've learned as I grew older, I talked about this a lot when I was defending. When I got my master's degree, I was very young, and I was so married to every single thing I wrote, and every single thing I did, I thought was just golden. And I felt so hurt when my professors would say, you need to change this. Now that I'm older, and through this NCU process and through the constant feedback from professors, I learned, wait a second, I am molding a piece of clay, and they're helping me, and I need to be as flexible as a piece of clay is in the molding process to make something beautiful. And so I was open to her suggestions, and we worked together, and I came out with something that I think was better than what my crazy plan was going to be. So yes, have your idea of what you want to do. And when I kind of honed in on what I wanted to do, all through my statistics courses, I wrote about the same thing, that I wanted to do this study on test anxiety, and here were the tests I thought would work. And those professors helped me say, yeah, this kind of statistical test won't work, this will. And I was better prepared to get to that dissertation process. But then even in it, I had to change a lot. And that's what transformative learning is. It's being aware of those changes, embracing them, and having fun with them.
Thank you.
And I do see that we have a typo there. Sorry, folks. I thought we edited it, but we missed one, Elizabeth.
It's okay. I'm sorry.
I do. So I don't want to bog us down with theoretical discussions and frameworks and, the ins and outs, but I do just want to introduce kind of Mezros theory. And this is really what this conversation is grounded in. So Mezro has 10 phases, or he's suggested 10 phases that we use to move through this process of transformation. And it starts with a disorienting dilemma, which I've always loved, and probably one of the reasons that I'll keep going back to this theory, because what in life is not disorienting? And if writing a dissertation is not disorienting, I don't know what is. So I think it's a good start for the conversation. And I'm going to apologize in advance, but I'm just going to read a little bit from Mezro's original work just to kind of give you an overview. It's not a lot, it's just like a couple lines, but I want to have that in front of me because I want to be sure that I accurately portray what Mezro has attempted to portray in his theory. So he introduced this transformational learning theory as a change process that transforms your frame of reference. So the frame of reference is what you come in thinking, knowing, your assumptions, your beliefs, all those things that Elizabeth talked about based on previous experience. And so our frames of reference they can shape our expectations and our feelings and our cognitions, but they can also limit them in a variety of ways, because if we think something is a certain way, oftentimes in our human brains, we'll dismiss information that doesn't quite fit in with that. So what transformational learning theory proposes is a process that takes what we have assumed to be true and puts us in a position that creates a readiness for change. Okay, so just a very, very basic overview of this theory. So what are some practices that lead us to that? And so kind of here's the nuts and bolts of what, Elizabeth and I have kind of picked out of this theory and kind of have landed on in terms of this particular experience and how it can be transforming. And in my opinion, it should be. I don't believe that getting any kind of education, and I mean this, I truly believe this can be something small, an informal educational process, or it can be something as complex as a doctoral degree. That's what we're talking about here today, but I think this can be applied in a lot of different contexts. But I believe that learning should be more than just developing skills and knowledge, that we need to have that other piece that changes us as a scholar, as a practitioner, broadens our worldview, all of those things that make us a contributor to our communities. And so that's the first point about transformative processes. They really need to have that community connection. If we are expected, practicing at the doctoral level, to go out in our communities and do great things and make change, we need to have that connection. And so we need to be able to think about those assumptions and those frame of references in a broader view. We need to engage in the inquiry process, which we do certainly in doctoral education, but that's also grounded in this discourse reflection cycle. And Elizabeth talked about that a little bit in terms of reading the feedback and then reflecting on what we need to do to make that change. In a lot of conversations, the discourse is actually a conversation between people, but I believe it really can be that interactive feedback where we give students that substantive feedback, we ask Socratic questions, we provide resources or alternative points of view, and then they engage in that reflection cycle. Interestingly, I believe that this is really connected to a growth mindset. And I kind of added this to my thinking in a kind of a transformational process myself when the SOE had a book study maybe a year ago so on Dweck's growth mindset work that she did. And so really an added piece to this is in order for a person to engage in and successfully complete that transformative practice or that transformative process, they really need to have a growth mindset. A fixed mindset isn't going to get us there. And this is a topic for perhaps another webinar. But we, in that book study, we talked about and we identified some strategies that help students, particularly some feedback strategies that help them develop that growth mindset. And in my opinion, again, leads to that transformative process. So it really is this relationship between the student and the faculty member, and there are responsibilities and obligations of both. Is this my slide?
Yep.
Okay, I was waiting for you. I was like, okay. Sorry about that, folks. So, and Elizabeth talked about that. So I'm not going to spend a long time on this because she talked about a beginning doctoral student, and you come in to the process certainly at varying levels. Some students have more developed skills, a greater understanding of the macrostructures and what they need to build those skills that they need to be successful, and others are in different places. And again, our experiences and our preparation, our prior learning, all contributes to that. So there isn't one place that students start, but there is kind of this place for a beginning doctoral students where it's more difficult to tolerate conflict and contradiction, and to consider that there may be other perspectives that provide insight into an issue that are just as compelling. So oftentimes students that are, or sometimes I find students that are a little bit less prepared for the doctoral experience to come in with a problem that they want to solve. Like, here's the problem. I want to, create a professional development program to solve this problem, or I want to prove that this is the best strategy. So those are beginning doctoral kinds of mindsets. And throughout the process, students inevitably learn more about that advanced thinking, integrating those growth mindset kinds of critical thinking skills, and are able to move into that advanced scholar place. This is your slide.
Yes, I know. I think that's a really good segue, because I know that's like I talked about. I had this thought in my head, and the problem finding behavior, I think, is where we begin, right? But when we get to the advanced level, when we're writing our dissertation, we are supposed to be able to find optimal solutions for the problem and then evaluate the competing interpretations. And one thing we need to be aware of is that we can have an idea, for a study that we're going to do for our dissertation, and then it turns out that what we thought was going to happen doesn't happen. And that doesn't mean that the dissertation's a failure or the study's a failure. You have to kind of work with the data that you receive, and you have to grow with that. And so I think that's the main difference between a beginning doctoral student and the advanced doctoral student. And the best, I think, addition that you have made to this, Lori, is talking about the fact that we have to have a growth mindset. Because if you have a fixed mindset, you're not going to be able to grow enough to write a dissertation, because you're not going to know everything, and you're not going to be a master at everything. And I don't know, for maybe some doctoral students have conducted studies in the past, I never had. And I didn't even know how to really do my statistical tests. So I had to reach out for help. And that's where that community comes in, because the format, even to this day, of running t-tests is very confusing to me. It's not something that I know innately how to do. So what did I do? I reached out for help. And that's what a truly educated person is going to do. It's when we acknowledge what we don't know and we know who to go to for help. And so community is very important. And at online schools, it can be harder to find that community, and the format to assignments can be confusing. And that's where the student needs to take the initiative and kind of reach out to your professor. If you're at the dissertation level, reach out to your chair. Also go to the aides in the student resource center and go to the tutors, and they will help you. But students can feel very disconnected from faculty. And this is where I think the faculty member, most of the burden falls on them, because anybody that's been through an online program will quickly realize that there is a formula through which everything takes place. And the difference between a professor that helps a student to be reflective and grow and transform and someone who doesn't is the professor that writes personal emails to the student and checks in on them. You know, the professor that is there to have conversations during office hours and is there to really help the student, because it can be really intimidating. So when faculty are able to reach students on a personal level and give detailed feedback that's helpful, that's constructive, and that also takes into account where the student is, both academically and emotionally and psychologically, and also helps the student know, okay, you know that we have a statistics department of tutors that can help you with your assignment. Then that helps the student who might be new to the process, who might be new to NCU, to not feel so disconnected. But on the other hand, the student needs to be very, you know, I don't want to say aggressive, but almost aggressive in reaching out for help. Because if you don't understand something and you don't email your professor or call them or reach out in some way and say, I don't understand, then you're not going to have that transformation. So the process can be intimidating, but the key is that we are a community. We might be a community that meets over the computer, but we are still a community. So when we form those connections and when we reach out for help and provide that help, we can make the process even more meaningful. And so that takes me kind of to the next slide in the presentation of how do we go about facilitating this transformation. So like I said, students need to proactively reach out to faculty, ask questions, and go to that community page that I think is called the Commons. It's been a year and it's been a long year.
Yes,
So,
the Commons.
maybe it's been 2 years. I don't even know.
The Commons, yes.
COVID has disrupted my perception of time. But the Commons, go to the Commons. When I discovered the Commons, I was so happy because those statistics tutors got me through my statistics classes and through my dissertation. Reach out for help and then be reflective. Like I said, take the time to read the feedback from your professors. Don't ever take anything personally. The professor's job is to go through your paper and tell you what you need to work on and where you still need to grow. So never take anything personally. And I think that can be a big impediment to growth, is to think that people are attacking you when they're not. They're just there to help you. And become involved. Get involved in those discussion boards. Go to those sessions that the tutors have where you meet with people and you can talk to people. Be part of the community. Whether it's an online or in brick and mortar school, the more involved you are, the better your experience is going to be. And like I said, the faculty needs to be there to familiarize students with the structure and provide opportunities for community development. Yeah, the Academic Success Center. Thank you. Yes, I am not good with remembering names of things, but yeah. And the professor is also there to scaffold the research process. And I think that NCU does this really well. The templates were very, very helpful to me in writing my dissertation because it's a format that's very different from any other writing I had ever done before. So that scaffolding was very helpful to me. So use that scaffolding to your advantage. And like Dr. Bedford said, if you want to look at dissertations to model after, use the dissertations in the NCU database, because those are the dissertations that are going to show you the kind of research that NCU is going to have you to do. And then faculty is also there to support inquiry and support evaluation. And I wasn't sure what kind of tests I was supposed to do for my dissertation. I thought I knew, and I was right on some points, but then on other points, you know, both Dr. Bedford and the statistics department told you, no, you don't want to use this kind of test. You're going to want to use that. And they really supported me. And so that helps. And that's a big deal for faculty. And then if the faculty models the inquiry process and connects students to those resources, it can be very, very helpful. And in my experience, Dr. Bedford was great about that. She always told me, go and read these dissertations and look at these different ways of doing things, and it helps a great deal. So if we take those two prongs and we put them together, we create a system that helps students go from that, you know, not understanding what's going on to embracing that ambiguity and using it to grow and to change. So are there any questions at this point?
Hold on one second. Feel free, of course, to post any questions you may have in the Q&A or the chat. Not at this time.
Are you ready for the next slide, Elizabeth?
Yes, I think it is you.
It is. So with that said, you know, I think that even though, you know, again, we're talking about the doctoral process, we talked a little bit about that this certainly could happen in other areas of education, but I think it's also a lifelong process. So when you think about after graduation, and I can appreciate, you know, the 2020, 2021 years with COVID and what all happened. They're like dog years, aren't they? So when you think about what happens after graduation, and then as you move into the world of practicing at the doctoral level, this transformation process, in my opinion, doesn't stop. So as a chair, I think sometimes students have expectations of what I know and what I'm able to provide. And certainly, I don't have all the answers, and I'm still learning. I'm learning a lot about research design. I'm learning lots about the topic areas that I'm interested in teaching. I work on my writing skills every day, and the ASC is helpful to me as a faculty member. And so in some ways, this student, this doctoral candidate, faculty interaction is beneficial in both ways. And that isn't something we have on this slide, but I just wanted to add that as I was thinking about what Elizabeth talked about in the last couple of slides, just about this process that it's a little complex, or it is one of the ways it's complex is that there's really no beginning, no end. I mean, certainly you're presented with a disorienting dilemma, but at what point new information becomes disorienting isn't really a specific event or place in time, nor, you know, can we identify that specific end when, oh, yep, I've transformed, here I am. Doesn't work that way, but it is something to keep in mind in terms of lifelong processes and lifelong learning. So a little bit about this graphic. Emily, did you have a question?
Yeah, there actually is. And I think it's kind of, it rolls into the whole, you know, as you are a student, as you are a doctoral student, and this goes into the master's piece as well too. As you are a master's student, you transform and you get to the end of your experience there. And as a doctoral student, you transform and get to the end of your experience, and then it goes to something else. In the chat, it says, someone posed the question, since the master's level does not prepare one for the mindset of the doctoral process, what are some of the other sources of ideas as we move into the doctoral level?
Great comment, great question. And so Elizabeth, I'll let you talk about this too, but just from my own experiences, I'm not sure, and this depends. I'm going to start that. This depends on where you get your master's degree and what kind of a master's degree you have. Some master's degree are research-based, others are practice-based. Mine was practice-based, so I'm like, what is this research thing of which you speak? So I did come in personally less prepared than perhaps someone else did. But with that said, I'm not sure that master's education doesn't prepare you. I mean, I think you learn about your content. If you've been, in a degree that has some research, you've learned something about research. But those macrostructures that I described in that second slide, that can be, you can really be blindsided by that, particularly if you've not had conversations with someone who has experienced it or someone who has more knowledge in it about what that's going to be like. So to prepare, I think this slide, let's just talk about this slide. And look, there's this typo in here too. That's really embarrassing. So as a transformative process, as a lifelong learner, I'm going to learn to perhaps proofread and edit better. So apologize for that. So just to build upon that idea. So at NCU, we use a model of teaching through engagement. What that means is that students and faculty work together to move students through either their master's or their doctoral program to enter. This is taken right from our website, to create or apply scholarship. So even in a master's degree, we're doing some creation, we're doing some application of scholarship. To actually accomplish that, some of the practices that we talked about were that community connection. One of the things that Mezros talks about in terms of the transformational learning process is relationships and the importance of relationships. So this typically isn't something what a person just does on their own. They can, but part of the theoretical framework is that this happens within the context of relationships and within the context of a community where we can have that discourse reflection and we can engage in inquiry, and that the faculty member can lead a student to a growth mindset through the type of feedback, Socratic questioning, providing resources, suggesting alternative perspectives. And to answer your question more specifically, then what can a student do to better prepare then is to keep an open mind in accepting that feedback and really reflect on it and think about, juxtapose that feedback with existing assumptions or frames of reference. I have always been an A student. Teachers have always said my writing is excellent. I know that I engage in critical thinking, and all of those things may be true, but to keep an open mind and develop that open mindset, that getting A's doesn't mean just completing the work and getting an A. It also means what I've learned, how I've grown, and understanding what's coming next. My writing has always been exemplary. Yeah. And this is also a disorienting dilemma sometimes for students, because the scholarly writing process is different than other types of writing. So high quality, very robust writing in other contexts isn't always what meets the standards for scholarly writing. So those are the kinds of things. I was really excited. I had a defense yesterday. Those are always fun, always a great day when we have another student graduate. one of the things she talked about in terms of just her own growth was the process of being able to accept constructive criticism. And she had disclosed that early on in her program, constructive criticism was very difficult for her. She took it personally. Elizabeth, I know you just talked about that. She didn't understand why all of a sudden at this point, she needed to make some changes. She needed to develop some skills that she didn't have before. But throughout the process of working with her chair, she learned what that meant and how she can embrace that, and clearly had that growth mindset. So the last piece of there, what does it mean to transform through this process? So we have individual goals. What is it we want to do with our degree? How is it that we want to contribute? Do we want to, or do we have some goals for social impacts? Are there things in our community that we want to do? Are there people with which we want to engage? Do we want to make a difference? And then, in my opinion, also part of that is really how are we going to contribute to the scholarly community. My opinion, at the doctoral level, when we practice there, we have an obligation to continue to contribute to the academics, whether we publish, whether we speak, whether we write blogs, whether we engage in discourse. However we do that, I believe that we have an obligation to share that knowledge and share the perspectives that we have. And that, in my opinion, demonstrates growth. And so I threw this on Elizabeth at the last moment, but I know that she has talked to me about some ways that she has experienced this. So I'm going to let her talk just a little bit more about that and build on some of the things that she said throughout this webinar. Elizabeth?
Well, I agree. And I think that I know I said before, from a history background, and I came in, research was easy for me, but concise writing was difficult for me. Because when I saw 7 pages, that was a challenge for me, because I was used to writing 13 pages, 15 pages, 20 pages, and that just came out of me. And so it was learning how to write very short, powerful sentences and get everything pared down to where it needs to be. So I think the first thing is, if you feel like you're not prepared at the doctoral level, the first thing is to realize that probably you're not, because it's a totally new experience and it's a totally new ballgame, right? And to embrace that dilemma of not knowing what you're doing. And then the second thing, go through and look at the macro structures and look at what support there is. Go to those online sessions. I know for when I was trying to figure out my question for my dissertation, I went to this online session with this amazing presenter, and she was like, I like your questions. Let's fix them and make them usable. And I was like, okay, great, thanks. Because at that point, I realized that I really don't know what I'm doing. And I think when you realize you don't know what you're doing, then you can be guided. But if you come in with this idea that, like Dr. Bedford said, I'm an A student, I know what I'm doing, then you're not going to grow. So that's what I would do. And for me, might sound funny, but learning how to cite stuff in APA and format in APA was challenging, because my whole experience was MLA in Chicago, and that was a challenge. So look at what your strengths are, what you got down, and then where you feel you need to grow. Then reach out to your professor and say, hey, I need help figuring out how to pare down my paper to only 7 pages for assignments. And they'll help you and say, okay, you need to go do this, or here's a resource. Or say, I am having a really hard time filling up 7 pages. How am I supposed to write this much? Be honest with where you are, be honest with what you need, and then you will be able to grow. And like she said, the personal transformation, once you graduate, the thing that I've been confronted with is, okay, now how do you go through the publication process? And that's something I'm learning right now with being rejected a lot. And that's okay. And you learn that you're going to be rejected when you submit papers, and that's part of the process. And you're going to get feedback from whatever journals you submit to. And they're going to say, we like this, but we don't like this, or, they're going to do certain things. So the process, like she said, never, ever ends. So I think the best thing to do, both at the doctoral level, whether this is your first class or you're about to defend, is realize that we need to be open to change and to realize that we have to be flexible. My dissertation was interrupted by the COVID pandemic. Like the day after I did my pretest, the world shut down and I had to revamp the whole entire thing in like 1 month. And thankfully, Dr. Bedford was super helpful. The people in the stats department at the tutoring people were really helpful. And the school I was doing my study with were really cooperative. And that was that community. We came together as a community and we figured it out. And I was able to defend. And I think my dissertation is more interesting now because of COVID, but that was a humongous hurdle to overcome. And if I hadn't already been in this transformative mindset, it might have derailed the whole thing. So just be open, just be flexible, and you'll be fine. And your professors are there to help you. That's the main thing to remember. They are on your side. They are there to be your teammate.
Elizabeth's challenges were like the epitome of everything that could happen to you. But yeah, she, you know what I do have to say, she always kept a positive attitude and went into it with this attitude that I can change, I can do something a little bit different. I have support, and I think that that's really what carried her through. So. Do you have anything else you'd like to add about this slide, Elizabeth, or are we ready to take questions and have some discussion to wrap it up?
To take questions. I think we've talked about everything. So
I think so too.
Okay, great. Feel free to pop some questions in the Q&A or the chat. There is one in the Q&A that I would like to ask, and then I'm also going to post some resources in the chat for folks based off of this question. But Saroy, I believe, forgive me if I pronounce that incorrectly, started the PhD in the BA program a couple of weeks ago. Online system is very new to this person. The first challenge I am facing is to understand the platform, challenging to find source of books and support documents. Also, the APA format is new to me. What is the best way to have streamlined support processes, tools in one package for a new student? Can I say a thing or two?
Yeah, please do, because I would say use the resources that the university has to offer you. The university has resources on all those things. So you've already taken the first step and you said, hey, I need some help with this stuff. And Emily, I think you're probably the best person in this team right here to describe or to provide those resources that the university has, and they're there.
Yes, absolutely. So especially for a new student, I would check out the CETL events calendar. It's in the Commons. They have statistic power hours on there. They have just in general, like, let's hang out and study, like it's time where you can just go and be on with other people that are pursuing their degree. Other general support sessions for you as well too. It's got writing power hours on there. So it just shows you exactly what time and how to log in and register for those events. And then for the APA formatting, I'm in my third class of my doctorate here at NCU. And I highly recommend going to the Academic Success Center and downloading the APA 7th edition template. That has been very helpful for me. I was an MLA person too when I did my master's. And actually, I got my master's at ASU, and I had a 5-chapter thesis. So I have some inclination of what I'm going into. But, you know, if you're a graduate student like me, you may be taking some time in between your degrees. I graduated in 2011. There's a whole lot for me to learn and resources to use as a student here. So I highly recommend checking out some of those resources that we have here. And there's another class as well too in your student portal called The Great Start. So you could check out that resource as well too. I'll pop that all in the chat, but any other questions that you have for Dr. Bedford and this journey that you are embarking on, or Dr. Contreras at this time? You feel free to raise your hand as well too if you'd like to unmute.
I want to just build on what Emily said. So know that all these resources are built into your tuition. So you've already paid for them. They're there. They're free to you. You can use them a whole lot or a little bit, and so they're always there. And the power hours are amazing. Those are the ones that are run by the alumni, right?
Yes.
Emily. So these are folks who have been there. So do check out the power hours if you have some of those questions.
One thing I'll say is be forward with your professors and be honest with your professors. Email them and say, hey, I'm brand new and I'm overwhelmed. And I have no idea what APA even looks like. And I went to this webinar and the wonderful host said that there's a template, but what is a template? And I just don't understand. And just email them. Because then there are people too, and they've all been there. And then they know also, they know when they get your first paper, if it's a mess, they know why, and they know where to help you. So be honest. And I think that's a hard thing, especially in an online school, because you don't see people very much. So they're a name and you're a name. And that can be really intimidating. But if you're honest and if you humanize yourself to them, then when they grade your stuff, they're grading your paper and they know more of what's going on. So reach out, be forward and be aggressive and tell them what you need.
And I just want to, Dr. Bedford mentioned it. A lot of, obviously, these services are free to you as a student, is built into your tuition. Keep in mind, Office 365 is in your university service module, because I recently ran into a student who was several courses in and didn't know that that was free to them. So PowerPoint, Excel, Word, that's all wrapped up into your Office 365. So if you haven't accessed it, go into your university service module, which is in your student portal, to do so. If that is all we have, are there any final thoughts, Dr. Bedford or Dr. Contreras, you would like to share before we close?
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, I would just say enjoy the journey because it's something that you will remember, and it's something that hopefully is a very positive and transformative experience. And just be open to it and be very honest with your professors of where you're struggling, because the worst thing the student can do is struggle in silence and then result in them not doing as well as they hope. So be honest about where you are, and then it's the professor's job to help you get to the next step, and they will. The professors at NCU are great.
Thank you, Dr.
That was eloquently said. I've got nothing else to add, Elizabeth. Thank you.
That's 100% fair. Thank you so much for all of our attendees for joining today. And as always, Dr. Bedford, thank you. And Dr. Contreras, thank you for sharing part of your journey with us and inspiring us to move on and move forward. So thank you.